Every year in the UK, I watch the same nightmare unfold. People think they're buying safe, decent meat, and then they end up sick for days, vomiting, fever, stomach cramps that leave them curled on the bathroom floor. More than 2.4 million people in Britain get food poisoning annually, and a frightening amount of it comes from meat that never should have been on shelves in the first place. What scares me most is how easy it is for dangerous products to slip through the system. I've seen meats filled with preservatives linked to long-term health risks, products bulked out with water, starches and chemicals instead of real protein, and cheap cuts so fatty they barely resemble actual meat. Some supermarket lines contain over 35% fat. Others are so pumped with salt and phosphates that nutritionists warn about bone loss and heart strain. And don't even get me started on the processing methods. Mechanically separated meat, that pink paste scraped from bone, regularly replaces real cuts without consumers even realizing. But here's the part that keeps me up at night. If the UK didn't notice 100% horse meat being sold as beef during the 2013 scandal, what else have we missed? If major retailers couldn't tell the difference between a cow and a horse, how confident should I be that the meat I'm eating is safe? What I'm about to show you are the UK meat brands with the worst scandals, the lowest quality, the dirtiest histories, the ones I would never let near my plate. At number 8, we've got Two Sisters Food Group, and the scandals go way deeper than most shoppers realise. If there is one name that quietly sits behind half of the chicken sold in British supermarkets, it is Two Sisters Food Group. Most people never even read the small label on the plastic wrapping. They simply buy the chicken breasts, the value packs, the breaded fillets, the nuggets, and the ready meals. But inside the food industry, this company is treated with deep suspicion because of what multiple undercover investigations have revealed. It is the type of supplier that looks perfectly normal on the surface while hiding practices that could make anyone sick. In 2017, The Guardian and ITV conducted one of the biggest undercover stings in British food history. What they found inside the Two Sisters factory was shocking, even to people who had worked in slaughterhouses for years. Workers were caught on camera altering kill dates. That means simply changing stickers so old chicken could be passed off as much fresher. Some employees admitted to mixing old poultry with newly processed batches, so it became impossible to know what was safe and what was past its microbial point of danger. And worst of all, the footage showed workers picking chicken pieces up from the floor and putting them back on the production line. This was not a one-time mistake, but a casual part of the workflow. The scandal was so huge that at least 8 major supermarkets suspended their contracts with the company. Aldi, Tesco, Sainsbury's, and even Marks and Spencer pulled their orders while investigations continued. When the biggest chains in the country refuse to sell your chicken, something catastrophic is happening behind the scenes. This is not just a business story. It is a human health disaster waiting to happen. Poultry is already the most dangerous meat in terms of bacterial risk. Old chicken breeds massive spikes of Campylobacter, Salmonella, and E. coli. The margin between safe and lethal is small. When kill dates are manipulated or storage is not strict, bacteria multiply fast enough to send families to the hospital. And customers at home have no idea their fresh chicken might have been sitting far beyond safe limits before being repackaged. Former workers described brutal pressure to increase production speed. The faster they worked, the more shortcuts they took. One whistleblower said the floors were constantly covered in blood, fat and water because cleaning between shifts was rushed or sometimes skipped. Another piece of equipment was simply wiped down instead of being sanitized because managers demanded unrealistic output deadlines. When a factory handles thousands of birds a day, hygiene cannot be optional. At Two Sisters, corner cutting became part of the system. There is also the nutritional question. many of their cheaper chicken products contain sodium injections and water-binding agents. These chemicals do not just increase weight artificially to maximize profit. They reduce the nutritional density of the meat itself. When something labelled as chicken breast contains 15% added water, customers are paying for liquid and sodium instead of protein. That also means they are unknowingly consuming higher salt loads that contribute to long-term health issues. This is why Two Sisters remains one of the worst meat sources people should avoid, not because of one mistake, but because of repeated patterns, mislabeling, hygiene issues, water injections, rushed production, dangerous shortcuts, and a level of risk hidden behind everyday convenience. At number 7, it's Bernard Matthews, a brand dragged through years of turkey controversies and welfare violations. Bernard Matthews is the brand many British families grew up with. Turkey drummers, turkey dinosaurs, roast slices, the easy Christmas options stacked in frozen aisles every winter. But behind the cheerful packaging lies one of the most troubled stories in UK meat production. A company repeatedly hit by disease outbreaks, welfare scandals and quality concerns, yet still found in major supermarkets every day. The biggest disaster came in 2007. Bernard Matthews operated the factory at the centre of one of Britain's largest avian flu crises. The strain was H5N1, a deadly form of bird flu that kills both poultry and humans. Thousands of birds had to be culled. The government investigated whether imported contaminated meat and poor internal biosafety had caused the outbreak. For days, the story dominated headlines and terrified customers. The idea that a turkey factory could become the ground zero of a potential pandemic was not just a quality issue, it was a national health risk. Then there were the animal welfare scandals. Undercover footage from the animal rights group Viva showed workers kicking and beating turkeys. Some staff were caught throwing birds around and mistreating them as if they were bags of rubbish. These acts were not isolated. They reflected a culture inside parts of the company where animal suffering became normal. When animals are handled violently before slaughter, bruising, contamination and disease risk increase. Meat quality declines, and the chance of selling unsafe products rises significantly. Bernard Matthews also became infamous for one of the most criticised processed meat products in British history, the turkey Twizzler. These spiralled strips were so high in salt, saturated fat and fillers that schools banned them across the country after Jamie Oliver's campaign. At one point, nearly 40% of a Twizzler was processed filler, stabilizers and fat rather than real turkey. That level of ultra-processing creates long-term risks, especially for children who consume them frequently. Factory hygiene issues have also been repeatedly flagged. Multiple reports surfaced over the years about pest problems, dirty production lines, and inadequate cleaning routines. When poultry facilities are not disinfected thoroughly, bacteria thrive and cross-contamination becomes inevitable. Turkey products that appear simple, like slices or nuggets, may carry bacteria because the plant behind them cut corners. A turkey product should be simple. Instead, Bernard Matthews turned it into a mixture of danger, controversy, and chemicals. It is not just a brand with history. It is a brand with scars that never fully healed. At number 6, we have Rustlers, the microwave burger brand, loaded with chemicals you never want in your body. Rustlers is the brand sold in nearly every petrol station, corner shop, and supermarket freezer. It is marketed as fast, easy, and satisfying. A burger you microwave in 90 seconds. But behind that convenience is one of the most ultra-processed meat products in the UK. These burgers are the closest thing on supermarket shelves to edible machinery. Engineered, preserved, stabilized, injected, flavored and heavily manipulated to survive long storage. One of the biggest concerns is sodium. Some Rustler's burgers contain up to 1,600 milligrams of sodium. That is almost an entire day's limit in one meal. High sodium is not a minor issue. It raises blood pressure, strains the heart, and contributes to long-term cardiovascular problems. For teenagers, who are some of Rustler's biggest consumers, this becomes a dangerous lifetime eating pattern. Then comes the meat percentage. Many Rustler's patties contain only 50 to 60% actual meat. The rest is filler, textured soy, protein, starches, phosphates, and binders. Phosphates are especially concerning. When consumed regularly, they weaken bones and affect cardiovascular function. These additives are allowed in the UK, but nutritionists warn that frequent consumption creates long-term risk. Cooking processed meat at high heat can create nitrosamines. Rustler's burgers are often microwaved and then eaten hot, which can cause chemical reactions that are linked to higher cancer risk. These burgers are engineered for long shelf life, not health. When a product can sit in a fridge for weeks without spoiling, the amount of preservatives required is not a small matter. Customer complaints paint a disturbing picture. People describe the meat as rubbery, grey, or artificially glossy. Some say it smells chemical even before heating. Others report a sour taste or a texture that feels nothing like real beef. These are warning signs that the meat quality is extremely low and heavily processed. Rustlers represent a dangerous category of food the UK normalised. Not because it is delicious, but because it is convenient. But convenience is not worth the health risks hidden inside every packet. At number 5, we've got Iceland own brand frozen meats. And the mystery meat scandals should already tell you why it's here. Iceland has built its entire empire on one promise: frozen food that is cheap, fast, and convenient. But behind that glossy promise lies one of the most notorious quality control histories in the UK meat market. Iceland's frozen burgers, frozen mince, and budget chicken products have been at the centre of some of the biggest food scandals of the last decade. Their reputation has never truly recovered from the truth that came to light. And what makes it even worse is that many consumers still buy these products simply because the price seems too good to question. That blind trust has cost British households more than they know. The most devastating blow came during the 2013 horse meat scandal. Iceland was not only implicated, the brand was humiliated. DNA tests discovered that some frozen burgers labelled as beef contained up to 100% horse meat. Not traces, not minor cross-contamination, actual horse meat substituted for beef inside products sold across the country. Iceland's own chief executive at the time claimed in an infamous interview that the problem must have come from rogue suppliers in Ireland and Poland attempting to cut costs. But that explanation only raised more questions. How does a national supermarket chain fail to notice that the meat it is selling is not even from the right species? A burger cannot contain 100% horse by accident. That level of contamination means complete supply chain collapse, total lack of oversight, and a willingness to buy the absolute cheapest meat possible without checking its legitimacy. Food scientists who studied the samples said the problem was rooted in the structure of mass frozen meat production. Why some manufacturers grind bulk meat from multiple sources, mix it with fillers, and then ship it to retailers, it becomes almost impossible to trace the origin. Iceland bought these cheap blends because they lowered costs dramatically. But along with low prices came high risks. Consumers were essentially eating mystery meat and trusting the packaging to tell them the truth. It didn't. And the problems did not stop there. Iceland has repeatedly issued recalls for uncooked chicken products that failed to reach safe internal temperatures when cooked according to the instructions. Some customers reported chicken remaining pink or cold in the middle, even after following the exact cooking guidelines. That is not a customer error. That is a processing failure. When meat is formed, breaded, and frozen in massive batches, temperature inconsistencies become deadly. Undercooked poultry is one of the leading causes of Salmonella and Campylobacter infections in the UK. It only takes one badly processed batch to send thousands of families to hospital. Quality concerns extend far beyond safety. Iceland's frozen burgers often contain extremely high fat percentages. Some varieties reach 32% fat. For comparison, an average fresh lean mince sits around 5% fat. This means Iceland's burgers are closer to fattified filler than actual beef. When cooked, these burgers shrink dramatically, turning into thin, greasy discs that leave behind puddles of oil. Customers frequently complain that the meat reduces to half its size, tastes watery, and leaves a strange smell in the kitchen. High-fat meat is not inherently dangerous, but when combined with low-quality sourcing and aggressive processing, it becomes a nutritional hazard. Excess saturated fat increases cardiovascular risk, and cheap blends often contain gristle, connective tissue, and mechanically separated scraps. One of the most disturbing practices tied to Iceland suppliers is water injection. Meat is injected with water mixed with salt, phosphates, and binding agents to increase weight. The customer pays for water while thinking they are buying meat. This practice reduces protein per gram, lowers nutritional value, and affects cooking safety because injected meat often fails to heat evenly. Food analysts have documented cases where injected chicken releases so much water that it steams rather than cooks, leaving a rubbery texture and pale color. Consumers wonder why their chicken breasts shrink by 40% in the pan. The answer is simple. They were paying for liquid. At number 4, it's Tesco Value Everyday Value Meats, the bargain range, hiding the lowest grade cuts and added water. Tesco is Britain's biggest supermarket. That scale gives it extraordinary power over the food supply chain. But it also means Tesco's cheapest meat range represents the very bottom of the legal quality threshold. Everyday value meats have long been criticised as some of the lowest grade products allowed on UK shelves. The issue is not that they are inexpensive. The issue is what Tesco had to compromise in order to sell meat at that price. The first major concern is the quality of the meat itself. Everyday value products often use the legally minimum protein levels required to be sold as beef, pork, or chicken. Meat that barely qualifies as meat. This means more connective tissue, more fat trimmings, more scraps from the cutting floor, and fewer whole muscle cuts. When customers open a pack of Tesco Value mince and see a greasy, mushy texture, that is the result of bottom-tier sourcing. Cheap mince can contain up to 40% fat. That is nearly half the product being fat rather than protein. Such ratios contribute to long-term health issues, including obesity, high cholesterol, and heart disease. Water injection is another widespread problem. Tesco Value chicken breasts and pork frequently contain added water to increase weight. The packaging may not always highlight the percentage clearly, but tests have found injected water content in some products well above 10%. Water dilutes the nutritional value of the meat, lowering protein density and causing the meat to cook unevenly. Many customers complain that Tesco Value chicken releases so much water when cooked that it boils in the pan instead of browning. This creates a rubbery texture and pale colour, and it also increases the risk of undercooking because the internal temperature rises more slowly. Chemical additives are a major concern in the value range. Sodium nitrite, phosphates, preservatives, and stabilizers are often added to cheap sausages, bacon, and processed cuts. Sodium nitrite in particular is under heavy scrutiny for its link to increased colorectal cancer risk when consumed regularly. Phosphates weaken bones, especially when eaten frequently in cheap processed meats. The cumulative effect of additives in low-cost products may not be felt immediately, but over years of consumption, they contribute to significant health degradation. Tesco was also heavily involved in the 2013 horse meat scandal. Their everyday value burgers tested positive for 29% horse DNA. That cannot be dismissed as accidental contamination. It indicates a supply chain that failed at every level. Tesco apologised and claimed suppliers misled them, but the damage was done. Customers realised that the cheapest products on the shelf were not merely low quality, they were potentially fraudulent. A supermarket with Tesco's resources should have had strict oversight. Instead, customers were eating mislabeled, misidentified meat. Tesco is a powerful brand, and many customers trust it unconditionally. But trust does not change the fact that the everyday value line belongs among the worst meat options in the UK. When cost becomes the only priority, everything that makes meat safe and nutritious disappears. At number 3, we have Asda Smart Price and Just Essentials Meats, a range repeatedly linked to high bacterial counts and chemical injections. Asda's budget range has undergone several rebrandings: Smart Price, then Just Essentials, but the underlying issues remain the same. These products represent some of the cheapest meat available at major UK supermarkets, and cheap in meat production often means dangerous. Asda has repeatedly been highlighted for high bacterial contamination, low meat percentages, excessive fillers, and questionable processing methods. One of the most alarming findings came from witch tests that discovered some of the highest Campylobacter contamination rates in Asda raw chicken compared to other supermarkets. Campylobacter is the leading cause of food poisoning in the UK, causing diarrhea, fever, vomiting, and in severe cases long-term illness, such as Guillain-Barré syndrome. When testing shows elevated contamination in a specific supermarket supply chain, it points to systemic problems in the processing plants. High bacteria loads mean the chicken was not chilled fast enough, not washed properly, or handled in conditions where cross-contamination spread. Asda's cheap sausages are another major concern. Many varieties contain as little as 42 to 50% meat. The remainder is made up of filler ingredients like wheat flour, soy protein, starch, vegetable fibre, and mechanically recovered scraps. These fillers are used to bulk up the product and lower cost, but they significantly reduce nutritional value and increase the risk of allergic reactions. High filler content also makes sausages difficult to cook safely because the mixture retains moisture, preventing the interior from reaching safe temperatures quickly. Chemical injections are widespread in Asda budget meats. Water and salt injections increase weight, making customers pay more for less actual meat. The protein-to-weight ratio becomes distorted, meaning families believe they are buying a full portion when most of the weight is actually water. This also affects cooking. Waterlogged chicken releases liquid in the pan, causing steaming rather than browning. This environment slows cooking and can leave cold spots where bacteria survive. Asda budget meat ranges attract customers trying to stretch their food budgets, especially during economic downturns. But cheap meat comes with hidden costs. The protein content is low, the fillers are high, the additives are concerning, and the risk of contamination is significantly higher. When a supermarket has documented high Campylobacter rates, recurring sour odour complaints, low meat percentages, and worker reports of poor hygiene, the safest choice is to avoid those products entirely. At number 2, it's Richmond sausages, the family favourite that's mostly fillers, additives, and barely any real meat. Richmond has achieved something most meat brands could only dream of. It is one of the best-selling sausage brands in the entire United Kingdom. It appears in school lunches, weekend fry-ups, kids' plates, and family dinners. But the popularity hides a truth that nutritionists have been warning about for years. Richmond sausages sit among the most heavily processed, low-meat, filler-loaded products on the British market. The packaging might present them as a simple family favourite, but the content inside tells a completely different story. The most alarming detail is the pork percentage. Richmond sausages have historically contained pork levels as low as 42%. That means more than half of the sausage, the remaining 58%, is not meat at all. It is made up of rusk, wheat flour, potato starch, vegetable oils, water, gums, binders, and a long list of additives that bulk up the product while reducing cost. When a sausage contains more filler than pork, The consumer is essentially buying a flavored starch tube that only meets the minimum legal requirement to be called a meat product. Low meat percentages create several problems. First, the nutritional value collapses. Protein density is poor, fat ratios are higher than expected, and salt levels rise dramatically because additives need to compensate for the missing flavor. Second, filler-heavy sausages have a spongy artificial texture that many customers complain about. Reviews often describe Richmond sausages as having a foam-like mouthfeel. People say the interior has no grain pattern, no fibrous meat structure, and no real bite. This is typical of products made with a high percentage of rusk and water-binding agents. Richmond also contains high levels of sodium nitrite, an additive used to cure meat and preserve color. Sodium nitrite has been linked in multiple studies to an increased risk of colorectal cancer when consumed regularly. While the levels in each sausage comply with UK regulations, the health risk comes from cumulative exposure, especially in households that eat processed meats multiple times per week. The World Health Organization has classified processed meats containing nitrites as carcinogenic. Richmond remains one of the most widely consumed nitrite-heavy sausage brands in the country. Another concern is the use of mechanically separated meat. This is a paste-like substance created by forcing meat bones through high-pressure machines to extract remnants of tissue. The result is the infamous pink slurry. It is legal, cheap, and widely used in lower-tier meat products, but it has almost no nutritional value compared to real cuts of pork. Mechanically separated meat increases moisture content and reduces protein density. It also creates a uniform texture that feels artificial. The presence of MSM explains why Richmond sausages behave more like processed cakes than traditional meat products when cooked. Despite all this, Richmond remains a household favourite because it is cheap, widely available and marketed as mild and kid-friendly. But mild flavour does not equal healthy. In fact, the mildness often comes from the absence of real meat. Richmond belongs on any list of meats to avoid because it represents everything consumers need to know about ultra-processed food. Low meat content, high filler content, nitrite curing, mechanically separated ingredients, and a nutritional profile that offers very little value. It is a brand built on affordability, not quality, and that affordability comes at a cost to health. And at number 1, topping this list, is Walls and Mattison's processed meats. The ultra-processed nitrite-packed products you should keep far away from your plate. Walls and Mattison's are two of the most recognizable processed meat brands in the United Kingdom. Their products are everywhere in British homes. Wafer-thin ham for school sandwiches, hot dogs for quick dinners, fridge raiders for snacks, Mattison's luncheon meat for lunchboxes. The convenience is appealing, and the taste is engineered to be addictive, but convenience comes with a nutritional price that is far too high. These brands sit at the extreme end of ultra-processed meat production, using additives, nitrites, modified starch, and stabilizers to build products that look like meat but behave more like chemical blends. One of the biggest concerns is sodium nitrite. Many Walls and Mattison's products contain nitrites to preserve color and extend shelf life. The World Health Organization has classified nitrite-preserved meats as a Group 1 carcinogen. That means there is strong evidence linking regular consumption to an increased risk of cancer. The risk is especially high for children, who are the biggest consumers of wafer-thin ham, hot dogs, mini sausages, and snack-style meats. Parents assume these items are harmless because they appear in supermarkets everywhere. But the health risks of nitrite consumption accumulate over time. Another issue is nitrate consumption in children. Wafer-thin ham and hot dogs rely heavily on nitrates to maintain the pink color that makes the meat look fresh. Nutritionists warn that children who eat these products regularly consume far more nitrates than recommended. Excess nitrate intake has been linked to long-term health issues, including digestive disorders, thyroid disruptions, and increased cancer risk. Because Mattisons and Walls target families and young consumers, this becomes a serious public health concern. Meat content is another major red flag. Many Walls hot dogs and Mattisons slices contain low percentages of actual meat. The remainder is made up of modified starch, vegetable gums, stabilizers, protein fillers, vegetable oils, and preservatives. These ingredients bulk up the product and reduce cost. But they also reduce protein, raise fat levels, and create an ultra-processed nutritional profile. In some cases, the meat percentage in certain products is shockingly low, barely meeting legal classification requirements. Fat content is extremely high in many Mattisons products. Some slices contain 14 grams of fat per 50 grams serving. That means nearly 30% of the weight is pure fat, much of it saturated. High saturated. Fat intake is linked to cardiovascular disease, high cholesterol, and obesity. When combined with nitrites, the health risk multiplies. Both Richmond and Walls Mattisons dominate the processed meat market because they are convenient and inexpensive. But convenience should not override safety or